David, welcome to the show. Good afternoon to you.
Welcome. Minor correction. I wish I was a graduate, but I spent too much time doing student politics and at the Cock, so I never actually got my degree.
Did you go somewhere else and finish your degree, did you?
No, I've never graduated, Michael. I did some further papers at Vic, and just as I quit my job to go full-time at Vic, I got a phone call from the Beehive saying, we've just had a guy, you might remember John Stringer, quit. Can you come and help out for a few weeks? And then 8 years later, I left.
So, actually, you're a bloody good example of not needing a university degree to succeed in life, aren't you, really?
Yeah, absolutely. With a 4-year-old, I'd sort of encourage you. It's too early now that you should try and get one if you do, but absolutely, you go. And I actually see a couple of former young Nats, technically they got degrees, but they decided to set up their own company. It's called Top and Guru. They're now like one of the world's leading social media consultancies. And what they do isn't related to their degrees. It's because they got really good experience about political marketing and social media. So I'm not saying don't do your degree, but you can absolutely have a good career without.
Okay. Listen, the other thing, just on that, do you think the Robertson appointment passes the sniff test?
I think it does, in that it's not a conspiracy where some people have said Grant or someone appointed Claire Curran to the council, then they appointed David Clark-Ridgway. I think it's more that universities are very left-leaning. Grant's a proud Otago old boy, and they probably thought, oh, he could be a good champion for us. And in their circles, what could be wrong with having a former Labour Minister of Finance? Now, do I think that they timed the closure date to allow Grant to play? Absolutely. I think 6 days after the election, when they actually had started searching in March, or not March, June, does look like there had already been conversation. In fact, I first heard Grant was being lined up for the VC role either just before or just after the election. So this wasn't something that I think would have come out of the blue for Grant. It was pretty obvious Labour were looking to lose for most of the year, so he would have already been starting to look around and talk about opportunities. But in the end, Raoul, I think you can definitely criticise the appointment. He's a BA, most people have PhDs. And I think, the council needs to front up and explain why they made the decision. I don't think it's failing the sniff test in that he gave them money as the minister so they would hire him as VC. I think that,
No, but it's a conflict of interest, I would have thought.
Lots of people money. Too much.
Well, okay. But I'm also I am going to go the advertisement, as Grant's pointed out this morning, Craig's pointed out this morning, the advertisement that they were looking for has a skill set that Grant Robertson doesn't have.
Yes, it's that's where the council. I mean, I've done quite a few CEO recruitments. In an ideal world, you always got scoring against set defined criteria. And if there is some controversy, you should be able to go and say, this is why we chose this person. It wasn't just, former Minister of Finance would be good. It was, these are the 5 or 10 things we were judging them on. This is how we judged them out of 10. And whether that was the case, I mean, there have been non-academics before who have been vice-chancellors, but the only ones since 1940s, I think, have been either Labour ministers, Brian Gould and Steve Mahari. Mahari did have a bit of academic experience. Or I think the Auckland VC, who was a business leader, but he then went on to be Vice-Chancellor of Oxford, so I think proved himself. So, it is very rare to not have an academic in charge. But to be fair to Grant, as opposed to being fair to decision makers, he's always been a huge fan of Otago. His only job outside government was basically marketing for Otago University, etc. And he's always kept up very close relations. So, I imagine this was Grant's dream job. jokingly, it gives hope to BAE graduates everywhere that you too should get a $630,000 job.
Yeah, no, sorry, mate. It's not going to pass my stuff test. He doesn't have the academic degree nor the experience in the private sector you've talked about to do that job. And I'll tell you something else about that and why it doesn't make sense to me, David. He's in the opposition. I mean, if they're expecting him to petition this government for special favour, haven't they chose exactly the wrong person? Just quietly.
I think that's quite a significant risk for the university because VCs will come and battle the government from time to time. But when you're the former opposition deputy leader or opposition finance minister, any attacks you make can be looked to be bad faith, that people can dismiss it. Well, of course he would say that. So by having chosen a former politician, it does actually reduce the ability of them to be effective with lobbying government. I would imagine that it would be very, very difficult for Grant to have any influence with the government. Not necessarily the case with all former ministers, but he was such an adversarial performer.
Yes, my view too. All right, now that's not what I got you on the show for. Last Friday we were talking. We've got our Australian correspondent Jackie Lane, who's ironically in New Zealand at the moment. But we were talking about the Attorney General of Australia, Mark Dreyfus, calling out what they call a crisis of male violence in Australia and demanding that men step up to prevent it. After the number of women killed in violent incidents so far reached 24, including 5 in a stabbing rampage at Sydney's Westfield markets or shopping centre in Bondi Junction last weekend. Of course, that wasn't the only stabbing of last week. An Assyrian Christian leader stabbed by a 16-year-old radicalised Muslim youth or Islamic faith youth was also attended a great deal of attention. But in the meantime, there have been demands for censorship, it would appear, across social media there and obviously internationally, to remove some of the evidence of the aftermath of both of those events. And you have some pretty strong views on that.
Yeah, it's because you can't look at them in isolation, Michael. There's actually a sort of global trend where authorities tend to take different stances to violent attacks based on the identity of the attacker. If the attacker is from a group that is intersectionally seen as oppressed, they then don't give much details. In the United States, there was a terrible case where there was multiple children killed at a school, and the killer was a former student who was trans. Now, let me be very, very clear. That doesn't mean they represent all trans people. Trans people are violent, none of that. But it's a fact that happened. And they had a manifesto where they talk about why they did it. Now, in the US, these manifestos, so they have very strong freedom of information laws, are normally put out by the police within hours or days. You say, they were white supremacists, they were... This particular manifesto, they've been battling it. It's just gone to court for a year to find out what it is because, we don't know why the authorities won't release it. And in Australia, as you talk about, we have a lovely term, an e-safety commissioner, who is always battling Twitter, trying to order them to remove stuff, not just in Australia, but around the world. And interestingly, she's the former head of safety for Twitter. So you do wonder if there's a bit of bad blood there.
Right.
But it seems to be, if you take the two cases, both terrible stabbings, of course. One seemed to be, but there's no proof of this, but based on what his father said, that he attacked mainly women because he was a misogynist, he couldn't get a girlfriend, and he hated women. Now, the other attack seemed to be very clearly because of his radical Islamist beliefs, because he actually yelled out, "You cannot insult Allah." He made chants, etc. So in both these cases, there's media and others saying, well, what caused it? What's the motivation? But only in one of these cases, the one where there's less evidence, are the media free to actually report everything. Around the case where there's much clearer evidence about the motivation, the government stepping in and saying, no, this might upset people, so you can't report it. Yeah, I'm a believer that actually you generally should report everything. Unless, what they've been publishing is a sort of how to do a terrorist attack. The more we know about, why people kill, I think we're better off.
Looking across at the Tasman from a New Zealand perspective, I would have thought that it was pretty easy why that man targeted the woman in Westfield Stadium. He was a paranoid schizophrenic, which sort of is a bit of a giveaway, waving around a knife off his medication. And the second was that he targeted people he could kill. One of them was a man. So the weakest and the most vulnerable, those who stood there, those who froze in the spotlights, those who wouldn't offer any physical defence, he killed those, David.
Yes, and he also, what's made it so much worse, if you can call it that, is he also killed a baby. So if it was...
Well, he tried to kill a baby, yeah.
Oh, yes, sorry, thank goodness she's actually doing it. Okay. But he actually stabbed 18 people, I think, in total, which
that's right.
Is a huge amount. The only proof that it was misogynist is what the father has said.